You are looking for something, maybe?
I suppose you could say that, though I don't expect to find it. So much has changed. I hardly recognize the Warsaw I once knew. I used to live in a little room not far from the river. I attended a fellowship a few blocks, I believe it was that way. I was trying to remember how it all looked before they built the walls.
Rachmiel Frydland? Is it you? It's me, Stasiek Eisenberg, from OGRODOWA Street.
Stasiek, oh my God, can it be?
Yes, yes!
Oh my God, Stasiek Eisenberg, it's been a lifetime.
I hardly recognized you. On these clothes, your head uncovered? You look like a goy.
These days, who can forget you're a Jew?
Huh.
But to be honest, sometimes I barely recognize myself.
So how is it, tell me, how is the paths never crossed? I've been in the ghetto since the walls went up.
I only arrived tonight.
Tonight? I don't understand. It's almost as hard to get in as it is to get out. How did you...
I convinced one of the foremen to let me join the work crew when they returned from their shift.
Why did you come?
I came to die. Here. With my people. With you.
No, that was a mistake.
Do
you have any idea how many people were killed to get out?
Stasiek, I have cheated death more times than I can remember. Sooner or later it comes for us all. I just wanted to have a say in where that would be.
But out there, in Warsaw, how were you able to get around?
I have papers. They're forged.
Of course.
Beyond these walls, I am Ivan Pertushik, born in White Russia, 1907. At first, I worried no one will believe I'm 12 years older than I really am. Then I saw my face in a store window.
Yeah, the war hasn't done anyone a favor. Still, you're lucky you weren't shot.
Oh, yes, luck follows me wherever I go.
And whatever luck you had, my friend, I promise you we did not follow you in here. But come, sit. You'll have to excuse me. There are no rations till tomorrow, so I have nothing to offer you but my company.
Stasiek, even with nothing to eat, I'm very happy to accept your offer.
You'll pardon my saying so. I seem to recall you always did like your food.
I'll tell you a secret. I dream about it. My mama's Shabbos chicken, my mama's Shabbos challah. Those early years, with my mama and tata and 4 beautiful sisters, sitting around the table laughing on a Friday night.
You're not the only one with such dreams, my friend. Rations in the ghetto were only just enough to slowly starve every Jew in Warsaw. If not for the smuggling, you would all have been dead long ago. Of course, if you're caught smuggling, death is anything but slow. It happened to my brother, Stefan, last summer.
Stasiek, I'm so sorry. I remember your brother. It sounds like he was a hero.
Yes, a hero. Like you.
Me? Stasiek, you have been in the ghetto too long.
Oh, and you are too modest.
Stasiek, Rachmiel Frydland may be many things, but the hero is not one of them.
Oh? What about that morning on OGRODOWA Street, huh? When the Germans came and knocked out all the electricity and the gas?
Between explosions, you and I take turns schlepping buckets of water from the river.
I come back to the kitchen, but it feels like my 100th bucket. Open the door, and there you are, coming out again with the knife that big. You almost killed me with that thing. I jump out of the way and think to myself, Rachmiel Frydland has officially gone crazy.
Yes. You know, there was a horse out in the street, right outside the mission. His eyes were wild. His hind leg was blown off. I dashed out the door, and next thing I know, I'm hacking away at this poor animal with bombs falling all around. Maybe I was crazy.
You were brave.
I used to tell my tata I could never be a ritual slaughterer because I can't stand the sight of blood, but I carved up that animal just like the Russians and Germans carved up Poland. It was not brave.
Still, we had food for several days, thanks to you.
Thanks to the horse.
The horse.
God forgive me, it's the first unclean thing I ever ate.
I'm certain God understood.
Tell me, Stasiek, is there anyone left from the fellowship?
They're gone. All of them. The shopkeepers, the scholars, teachers, children. So many children. Most to deportation, or starvation. I myself escaped deportation more than once. Oh, can you listen to me? This is a death trap. From here, there will soon be no escape. We'll keep company until the rush shift changes over. But in the morning, you must find your way back out.
I can't leave.
You can't stay.
But where will I go? Where will I go? Stasiek, you remember that German Baptist church by the cemetery?
Pastor Hoffman.
Yesterday I dropped in on his service.
Why on earth would you take such a chance?
You yourself said I look like a goy.
Yeah, but still.
I needed to hear the words of the scripture to remind myself of the grace that drew me so many years ago.
Did you hear what you came for?
I heard the scripture, but it was not what I came for.
The Bible clearly states, submit yourselves to every ordinance of man, as unto them sent by God for the punishment of evildoers. Brothers and sisters, every German victory is the will of the Lord.
Excuse me, Mr. Rosenberg.
Yes, what is it?
If I could have a minute.
What are you doing here?
It's Rachmiel Frydland.
I know who it is.
I came to ask if
I can't help you.
But you baptized me.
You've been erased.
What?
Erased. All you Jews. Purged from our records according to the law of the land. One God, one Reich, one church, no Jews.
But you called me your brother.
That was another time.
What about the love of Jesus? Was that another time?
I think you had better go.
So here I am, the one place where I'm not erased.
Soon we will all be erased, my friend. I can't believe you went to see Pastor Hoffman. Talk about chutzpah.
Unlike heroism, chutzpah is something I happen to possess in remarkable abundance.
Oh, you don't have to tell me. I was there when you first said put it through the door in the mission on OGRODOWA Street.
You mean the night I made a fool of myself?
Exactly. I have to say, it was one of the most entertaining evenings I've ever spent there.
Stasiek, what you saw that night was a failed young man with something to prove.
Failed? Failed at what? I mean, you couldn't have been more than...
17? That night was the unexpected culmination of a 10-year journey. And believe me when I tell you, OGRODOWA Street was the last place I thought I would end up when that journey began. When I turned 7, my mama packed up my clothes, wraps up a piece of challah, and Tata and I walk out of our little village of Lesnichovka.
Rachmiel, we'll never make it to Ruda if you don't keep up with your Tata.
But your legs, they're twice as long as mine.
Then you'll just have to walk twice as fast.
But why must I leave Lesnichovka? I already miss Mama, and Rachel, and Judith, and Rivka, and Esther.
If you are going to become the scholar God has created you to be, then you need to study with a melamed, a real teacher, not just a tata.
But I learned everything you taught me.
Which is precisely why you need to go and study someplace else. Now come. No more complaining, yes? Recite the Psalms for your tata. It'll help to pass the time.
On the third day, we knock on the door of Reb Gershon, the most highly respected melamed in all of Ruda. When the door opens, a very tall man with a very long beard appears before us. But peeking out from behind him is the prettiest girl I've ever seen. A foot taller than me, but even through my dirty glasses, I can see she is someone very special. So you can imagine my disappointment when Reb Gershon turns us away. "I'm sorry, Mr. Frydland," he says. "I'm certain your son is every bit the prodigy you claim. But my wife, the Rebbitzin, promises if I bring in one more boy to feed, she'll take our daughter and our tea kettle and go live with her sister in Warsaw." The door closes, and just like that, the little girl vanishes. Tata and I walked down the street to the home of Reb Pincus, who, while not as highly regarded as Reb Gershon, agrees to take me in. There I study Hebrew in a house full of boys.
After growing up with 4 sisters, I mean, that must have been quite the adventure.
It was. But what I remember most about those years is how Reb Pincus would become transported whenever he would talk about the day the Messiah would come. On that day, there will be a feast unlike anything you can imagine. The great wild ox of Jewish legend will be roasted over a fire with the aroma of an animal that has grazed on 1,000 hills of sweet grass. We'll dine on Leviathan, a fish so long it encircles the earth. And we'll drink the wine the Almighty himself set aside on the 6th day of creation. Stasiek, every night with Reb Pincus, I dream of that feast. Lately, the dream returns.
So you studied there for 10 years?
No, Ruda was just the beginning of my journey. By the time I met you, I had been studying a very prestigious yeshiva here in Warsaw for many years.
I knew it. I could tell from the minute you stepped through the door. You had the look of a learned man.
I had the look of a promising student who hadn't quite kept his promise. I'd quit yeshiva only days before.
Oh, your tata must have been disappointed.
That is putting it mildly. Though, to be honest, it wasn't entirely my fault. There was a teacher here in Warsaw who loved nothing more than to make fun of one of the places I had studied and to ridicule me as well.
What, the little town with the Melamed?
No, I'm talking about Chelm, a real city, renowned for its outstanding rabbinical schools.
Oh, you mean renowned for its ridiculous religious leaders who took themselves and their own piety entirely too seriously.
A reputation that was undeserved.
A reputation which made Helm famous throughout Poland for all the wrong reasons. All right, so tell me what happens with the yeshiva teacher in Warsaw.
One morning, he calls on me to elucidate a fine point regarding the laws of the Sabbath. I'm about to impress everyone with what I know when he says, "Now we will hear from the Chelmer fool, a fool who is blind to his own arrogance, an arrogance that will one day prove to be his undoing." The students howl. The teacher bangs on the podium for order. "Chelmer fool," he says, "look at the commotion you've caused in my classroom. Such behavior must be reported to the head of the yeshiva." What is not funny is from that day on, I'm suspended from all my classes, removed from the company of my fellow students, and left to study for 11 long hours a day on my own, tediously memorizing what this or that rabbi had to say about what this or that rabbi had to say millennia ago.
Oh, talk about foolishness.
The isolation is devastating. And yeshiva begins to feel like a coat I'm starting to outgrow.
Or maybe a cocoon from which you can finally emerge.
I leave yeshiva, and for the first time I find myself among ordinary city people. I walk around in my Orthodox clothes feeling out of step with the world around me.
Yes, the world where I grew up, full of all those ordinary people.
Stasiek, I didn't mean anything.
We were the Reform Jews that you yeshiva boys like to look down on, when you bothered to see us at all. Though to be fair, we didn't think much about your quaint clothes or your ritual practices. You know, Rachmiel, my father had a plan too. He wanted me to become a concert pianist.
That's right. I remember you played piano at the meetings on OGRODOWA Street.
Not exactly what my father had in mind.
And I suppose we were both disappointments.
I suppose we were.
Here in Warsaw, I realized not only am I unfit for yeshiva, I'm not fit for anything. I find a small basement room for 1 zloty a month and begin peddling clothing in the street. One day, my landlady stops me on the stairs. "Mr. Frydland," she says, "unlike you, my husband and I are not learned in the teachings of the rabbis. Recently, we began attending the meetings on OGRODOWA Street just for something to do. The people are lovely and the music is quite nice. But when they show us passages from the Bible that support their beliefs in Him, I'm afraid we have no answers. Please, won't you join us tomorrow night and show us the error of their ways?"
You came to OGRODOWA Street on a mission of your own.
How can I refuse? After 9 years in yeshiva, I'm confident,
Arrogant?
certain, that I can straighten out anyone on the matter of Him. I enter the forbidden building and sit myself down in the middle of the meeting.
And that is when Mr. Rosenberg starts to pray.
In Yiddish!
And you explode!
Jewish prayer is not just some ignorant muttering in the language of the street. Prayer must be prayed in Hebrew, and always, always from the prayer books. But as I sit down, I think, why must it be in Hebrew? Does God understand this language only? And how did our fathers pray in the days before the prayer books were written? Whatever I'm thinking, Mr. Rosenberg doesn't miss a beat.
Ladies and gentlemen, please turn with me in your Bibles to the 6th chapter of Judges. Gideon is called upon to lead the armies of God against the enemies of Israel. What is his response? To seek a sign, to give him the courage to forsake the life he has always known and follow the call of God.
I can't help but notice Mr. Rosenberg is looking right at me.
So, Lord, he prays, tonight I will place a woolen fleece on the threshing floor. If in the morning, if there is dew only on the fleece but not on the floor beside it, Then I know that you will save Israel by my hand." The next morning, Gideon returns to the threshing floor. The ground is dry, but he squeezes a bowl full of dew from the wet fleece.
It's a familiar story, but somehow tonight it feels personal, like God is close, not mediated through centuries of debate or wrapped in a tangle of differing opinions.
But still, Gideon requires further proof. "Lord God," he prays, "if you will indulge me one final time, I will again place out the fleece. And in the morning, if you could arrange it, let the ground be wet with dew, but the fleece be dry." And is God angry? No. For God understands the struggle of such a pivotal moment. Next morning, Gideon returns to the threshing floor. Dew soaks his sandals, but the fleece is dry as bone.
I look around and think, no wonder the missionaries are having success among these simple people. But in the end, is there really any more to the story than what this man has said?
And you too can put God to the test. See if the scriptures are not filled with signs and prophecies that point to Jesus as the Messiah. But I must warn you, do not ask unless you are prepared to face the consequences.
Then show me if you can.
I will be available to answer questions following the service.
Poor Mrs. Greiker is sorry she ever invited me. After the meeting, she slips out the door without a word.
Rachmiel, tell me, why did you come to the meeting that night, really?
To prove to my tata that I hadn't wasted the education my family had sacrificed for.
There are many other worthy occupations, you know.
Not for me. Not for my tata.
I have learned that not everyone is meant to be a concert pianist. Not everyone is meant to be a great religious scholar.
I'm sure you're right.
Then why is it so important for you and for your tata?
Oh, Stasiek, it's a long story.
Fortunate for you, I have no other pressing engagements. I don't know what has brought us together tonight, but it can be great pleasure to imagine that we are just two old friends catching up on a chilly evening in Warsaw. So, if you don't mind, I will pretend to have a glass of schnapps. And you will pretend to have?
My mama's Shabbos chicken.
Of course. So, tell me, why, at the ripe old ages of 17, you feel like such a failure?
Stasiek, you know this song?
Everyone knows Raisins and Almonds. And my father wrote an arrangement for the piano. I've played it many times.
My tata sings it to me every night. He takes off my glasses. We recite the bedtime Shema. And he reads me a story. The same story every night.
Once upon a time, there was a mama and a tata who had 4 beautiful and pious daughters. And the tata doted on each one, as much as a man with 1 cow and a few chickens can dote on anything. But the tata had a secret.
I know.
Excuse me, who is telling the story? You or the tata?
You are tata.
So, you will listen, and I will tell. What the tata wanted more than anything else in the world.
A son.
A son, yes. A son to teach God's commandments. A son to learn the traditions of our people. A son to become a great religious scholar, if it be your will. A son to say Kaddish for me when I'm gone. So, the mama and the tata agreed to eat 1 less potato for dinner every day for a whole year, so they can save their grosha and bring a gift to the Rabbi of Ravitz, a pious and mystical man who is said to speak with the voice of God. At long last, the tata comes face to face with the rabbi. "O great sage, I am but a poor farmer and a small-time merchant from Lesnichovka. I have walked for many days to ask of you one thing." But the rabbi raises one hand, recites a simple benediction, and sends the tata home. The next spring, just before Passover, when the wildflowers outside our village covers the field like a carpet, the midwife places you in the arms of your tata. And the moil makes you a member of the people of Israel.
That day he named me Rachmiel, the mercy of God.
Rachmiel, do you not believe God is merciful?
These days, who doesn't doubt it when you see what we have seen?
I suppose all that remains then is to trust the best we can.
My tata trusted. How could he know that his miracle of a son would not only fail to become everything he'd hoped, but that he would become the one thing no tata could ever even imagine? You know, Stasiek, every morning when my tata would recite the words of the prayer book, "Thank you, God, I am not a goy,"
What of the arrogance you Orthodox are so famous for?
he would explain that the prayer is not meant for us to look down on the Gentiles, God forbid, but to understand that being a Jew is a privilege and a responsibility. Though there are times, I must admit, when being a Gentile does appear to have its advantages.
I can think of one or two. Though I don't imagine you had much contact with the Goyim in that little cocoon of yours.
On the contrary, my worldly friend, ours was the only Jewish family in all of Lesnichovka. We ran a little store out of our home. We sold soap, matches, hairpins, and candy to our neighbors, the Roman Catholics, the Greek Orthodox, the Lutherans, and the Baptists.
And how was business with the Goyim?
Good and bad. Good because they needed the things we sold. Bad because they ran up bills they had no intention of paying. Until one day, a traveling minister comes to preach a revival next door at the home of our neighbor, Mrs. Hubscher, who rushes over to talk to my tata. "Yoo-hoo, Mr. Frydland!" I don't know if you heard, but a very famous preacher from outside the district is coming here to our very own little Lesnichovka to preach the word of Jesus to anyone that's willing to listen. So I was wondering, could I borrow your chairs? Tata is so relieved that Mrs. Hubscher's interest is in our chairs and not our souls, he carries them next door himself. And when the preacher leaves, Tata is even happier. It starts when a little girl comes into the store. "Beg pardon, Mr. Frydland," she says. "Yes, that's right. I was in here about a month ago. You remember?" That's what they came to talk about. You see, the preacher said that God condemns those who steal, even if it is just taking a paper of pins from Jews. Well, the Lord Jesus Christ forgave my sins, but the preacher said I have to make it right, so here.
Oh, even if it is just a paper of pins
From Jews. Soon a parade of guilty converts shows up to settle their delinquent accounts. And for a time, business is looking up. But before long, those who had seen the light return to their old ways, and my tata is forced to close the store and begin peddling clothing in the street.
Ironic how you and your father should end up in the same line of work.
The irony is he did it so I could become a great scholar. I did it to avoid that same fate.
And only days later, you accept Mrs. Gracker's invitation to the mission, and so you can justify all your years of study and set everyone straight.
I suppose there's just no end to the irony.
Or the foolishness. Speaking of foolishness,
Oh, Stasiek, don't start.
you never told me how it is you found yourself in Chelm. I'm only asking.
He's only asking.
So, no?
When my family has to close down the store, they can no longer afford to board me with Reb Pincus.
In Rudahuta.
Yes. So this summer I turned 10. Tata and I set out for Chelm, home to many of Poland's finest yeshivas.
Oh, so you said.
Yes. Well, I didn't know it at the time, but I was what you call a charity case. And because I'm at the mercy of whoever feeds me breakfast, I sometimes arrive at my first class after the teacher has begun the lesson. I sneak in the back, hoping to go unnoticed, but no such luck. "Late again, Frydland," he says. "How many times must I remind you that your first obligation is not to the family who feeds your body, but to the yeshiva that nourishes your soul? As our sages said, eat bread with salt, drink water by measure, sleep on hard earth, and live the life of affliction."
What?
But continue toiling in the study of the Torah, and it shall be well for you in the world to come.
Live the life of affliction?
It's a frightening proposition for a boy of 10.
That's a frightening proposition for anyone.
Nevertheless, with the promise of eternal reward, I sleep on frozen straw on hard floors, graciously accept whatever my benefactors can offer, and spend long days studying the holy books. The way I see it, my one job in Chelm is to make my Tata proud.
I'm sure he was.
Well, before too long, I once again find myself in trouble.
I'll bet it had something to do with food.
An enterprising yeshiva student begins selling hard candies to us boys to get us from one meal to the next. At first, I only indulge when I have a spare coin in my pocket.
But
before long, my Tata is summoned to fix my debt.
Ooh.
I see that look on his face. I hear him whisper, Narishkeit. And I know that my foolishness has let him down again. I'm no better than the goyim who put my family out of business.
Oh, you were hungry.
In those days, I thought I knew what hunger was.
But you were 10. Besides, you were in Chelm, the foolishness capital of Poland.
Stop.
Oh, surely you've heard these stories.
Many times.
My favorite is the one about the snow.
You know, I think it might be cold enough to snow tonight, don't you?
So, one clear moonlit night, an unexpected snow falls upon Chelm. The elders look outside the window and declare the sparkling crystals too beautiful to disturb. Let us send a messenger to warn the people not to walk in the snow, suggests one elder. But, says another, if the messenger walks to the streets, then he himself will trample the snow. And of course he's right. So they decide that the messenger should not walk to the streets, but should be carried by 4 strong and devout men, so that the messenger's feet do not disturb the soft white blanket. So before dawn, a herald is placed on a heavy wooden table, which is then placed on the shoulders of 4 of Chelm's most pious men. And they go out to alert the inhabitants. Early the next morning,
the elders of Chelm are stunned to find footprints everywhere.
So you see, you were just one more fool in a fool's paradise.
You know, Stasiek, my favorite story is the one of the student who comes to his teacher. Rabbi, he says, does Chelm have a future? The rabbi answers, don't worry, my son. Chelm has a future, and we can expect it any day. The trouble is, Stasiek, I've been to Chelm. The yeshiva where I studied, the homes where I slept and ate. I walked those familiar streets, but I could not find a single Jew. I guess you could say the future of Chelm came before anyone anticipated.
I think I'll have another shot of schnapps. For the cold.
You want some of my mama's Shabbos chicken? It's especially tasty tonight.
Oh, no, thank you. I recently had a large and sumptuous dinner at one of Warsaw's fine dining establishments.
Then enjoy your drink, my friend.
L'chaim.
To life.
Whatever is left of it. Tell me, Rachmiel, what do you miss most, apart from food? I miss the fellowship on OGRODOWA Street. You know, the little meetings, the terrible singing.
Mr. Rosenberg thought he was Caruso.
You know, my father heard Caruso sing in Warsaw over 40 years ago. He said it was like hearing the voice of God. I'm glad he didn't live long enough to see all of this.
Caruso?
My father.
What I miss most is my sister's laughter. My mom and Tata, they were too busy to laugh, but my sister's laughter filled every corner of our home. It's what passed for great music in Lesnichovka. The summer I turned 5, my Tata takes me to see the Rabbi of Ravitz, the hero of my bedtime story. I'm certain that this is the moment I will finally hear the voice of God for myself. I step forward and am face to face with the great man himself. Moments later, we're whisked out of his presence and back on the road to Lesnichovka. I didn't hear the voice of God that day. Sometimes I fear that my sister's laughter is as close as I'll ever come. Tell me, Stasiek, have you ever heard it?
The voice of God? Not that I remember.
That's what I like about you. You're even less pious than I am.
I didn't say that. Of course, I was raised with a much lower bar.
You didn't tell me how you came to OGRODOWA Street. I thought even the Reformed Jews had no patience for missionaries.
I was invited.
By your landlady?
By a lady.
A shiksa.
Polina. She could play a violin that would break your heart. Her family was Lutheran, and she thought that if I converted, then perhaps her parents would find me...
Acceptable?
I have learned that it is a mistake to run away from who you are. The sermon I heard from Mr. Rosenberg was compelling, and though Paulina's parents were not satisfied, I found this myself a spiritual home on OGRODOWA Street.
Stasiek, may I confess something?
Of course.
It's not my finest moment. You may lose whatever respect you had for me.
If nothing else, I respect your honesty.
The day Poland surrendered, I left Warsaw to find work outside the city.
Well, there certainly wasn't anything left to do around here.
On the way out of town, I stopped at the German Baptist church.
Was that before or after Pastor Hoffman sold his soul to the Reich?
I asked if he would sign a baptismal certificate to help get me past the German checkpoints.
Not the crime to use your head.
So I walk all day with my little insurance policy in my pocket. I reach the edge of town and I stop to dig a potato out of the ground. A German soldier supervising a work crew spots me.
Du! Bist du Jude? You have that look, so don't lie. Are you a Jew? What's this? Oh, baptized. German Baptist Church. Ja, aber du bist doch Jude. You may be baptized, but it didn't wash away the stink you people all carry around with you. Now get down there with the others and dig.
I find myself in a ditch next to the rotting carcass of a dead horse. If I didn't smell before, I do now. German Baptist Church. At first I think, how can the same people who introduced me to the grace of God be so cruel? Then I realized that my own failed strategy has revealed the moral coward I have truly become.
That's it? That's your confession?
Yes.
You'll have to forgive me for finding it so unimpressive. I know you grew up thinking you were something special.
You yourself just said we can't run away from who we really are.
Then what do you want from me? A pardon? Absolution? For what? Eating an unkosher animal? Or trying to outsmart a soldier who'd happily put a bullet through your head?
For not speaking up, not admitting that
I have seen every vile inclination there is. The inclination to survive is one to admire, not condemn.
But Stasiek, do you ever feel condemned to live? To bear the guilt of survival when so many...
Rachmiel, stop trying to make sense of something that cannot be explained.
But don't you struggle?
I was never a religious prodigy. I don't expect to comprehend the unfathomable. Maybe you disappointed your tata. Maybe you disappointed God. How long do you plan to carry all that around?
As long as I live.
Who am I to stand in your way?
You know, Stasiek, I was here when they were building these walls. 2 of my sisters had typhus. I came to Warsaw to visit them. Everywhere there were signs indicating the quarantine. And all around there was hammering. Rivka? Rivka, is that you?
Is that my brother, Rachmiel?
It's so dark. Maybe if I pull this curtain...
No, please. Don't. The light, it hurts my eyes. Besides, I don't want you should see me like this, all sores and rashes.
I'm sure you're as lovely as ever.
Didn't Tata ever teach you it's a sin to lie?
So, where is Esther? Esther! Esther, it's Rachmiel!
Rachmiel, no!
Oh, God.
It was the typhus. Oh. She asked to be remembered to you. I'm so sorry. Esther loves her baby brother more than life itself.
Rivka.
No, Rachmiel, please stay away.
I need to hold your hand.
You need to be strong.
But I'm not strong.
But you are.
If I was strong, I wouldn't be such a disappointment to you, to Mama, to Tata.
You will find the strength to tell Mama about Esther.
What is that hammering?
That is the sound of life these days for Jews in Warsaw.
Oh, the quarantine.
It's not the typhus they're isolating. It's us. Now go, before you find yourself with no way out. I will follow as soon as I can. And please, don't tell Mama I sent you away hungry. She never forgives me.
Esther, dead. How can it be? And how will I tell my parents when my tata has not even uttered my name in 5 years?
Since you became a believer?
Since I became a disgrace.
You know, you never finished your story.
What?
Oh, that night in OGRODOWA Street, when you were going to justify all your training and set everyone straight?
Now you're making fun.
Maybe a little. Hey, you're the one who said that laughter might just sound like the voice of God.
My sister's laughter.
Okay. So, what happens after the meeting? After everyone's gone, how does it go with Mr. Frydland? Mr. Rosenberg.
Mr. Rosenberg stands at his podium, flipping through that big Bible of his, throwing out one prophecy after another.
New Mr. Frydland. What do you think?
I think, Mr. Rosenberg, that you're wasting your time. None of what you have said proves that your Jesus is the Messiah. The one the Jews are waiting for will fulfill not only the prophecies you've told me, but many others he clearly does not satisfy.
As a scholar, I'm sure you're familiar with the book of Daniel.
Of course.
So you'll know that in chapter 9, the prophet says Messiah will make an end of transgression, bring reconciliation for iniquity, be cut off, but not for himself.
Mr. Rosenberg, I'm quite familiar.
And that all of this must happen before Jerusalem is destroyed. As we all know, Rome demolished the holy city in 70 of the Common Era.
Of course.
So, according to Daniel, Messiah must come before.
Then I will study all that our learned rabbis have to say on the subject and return to you with an explanation that will expose the foolishness of your mistaken assumptions.
An open mind, Mr. Frydland. That's all I ask. In the meantime, please accept this little gift. It's a New Testament, and like my opening prayer, it's in Yiddish. I hope you won't have a problem with that.
I finally come across Daniel and all its commentaries in the library of Warsaw's biggest yeshiva. Rashi, 19th century rabbi, 11th century rabbi, and one of our greatest Jewish scholars. Now I will have my answer, and Mr. Rosenberg will be out of business. I knew it. You can always count on Rashi to clear up even the thorniest dilemma. It says right here that in that entry from Daniel, the word Messiah actually refers to King Agrippa, who was slain shortly before the Romans conquered the temple in Jerusalem, meeting the timeline of Daniel 9.
And that answer your question?
Of course, why wouldn't it? It's Rashi, an interpretation that has satisfied Jews for centuries. Jews that would rather face death than believe in him. But King Agrippa, who is not even a descendant of King David, a requirement of the Messiah that every child knows, this is Rashi's answer? Then I begin to think, why should I let Mr. Rosenberg put me on the defensive when I can simply refute this ridiculous book of Goyish lies? So I open it up and start at the beginning, here, in the Gospel according to Matthew. I'm looking for icons, idolatry, the sort of anti-Semitism I've come to expect from the Christian faith. What I find instead is a poor Jew, a Jew who recites Torah like a rabbi. Instead of finding fault, I find a Melamed, whose teachings are clearer than any commentaries I've ever studied.
And you race over to Mr. Rosenberg with your discovery?
And admit that perhaps I was wrong?
Oh, the most difficult words in any language.
No, I escape the city and find work outside Warsaw, avoiding OGRODOWA Street and any possibility of disappointing my tata in this frightening new way. One day I'm pulling weeds in a park. when the local police arrive. "Are you Rachmiel Frydland?" he says. "Yes." "Good," he says, "but maybe not so good for me. He has a warrant for my arrest. Peddling without a license."
The irony continues.
They take me down to the station to spend 48 hours without food or visitors.
No food.
Or visitors. In a tiny, dark shed with a window no bigger than my fist. They order me to empty my pockets and turn over my belt as I begin to serve my time. The air is hot with a chorus of mosquitoes who, unlike me, are free to come and go as they please. I try to make myself as comfortable as I can.
48 hours in the company of mosquitoes is nothing for someone who has lived the life of affliction.
Somehow it seems the police have missed this little book in my pocket. So, with nothing else to do, I sit by the window and I read. Soon the cramped quarters and the impending darkness and the heat hardly matter. My mind is awake and I'm hungry, but not for food. The veil of my own prejudice begins to lift, and I soon find everything I've ever yearned to understand about God in the story of this one simple Jew. Him.
What about your Tata?
I scrupulously avoid mention of my little incarceration.
But do you mention him?
Stasiek, are you familiar with the phrase "Täuschen das Rendel"?
Exchanging one currency for another, right?
It's what I'm accused of any time I try to explain what has happened. And while I know that my Jewishness is still as close to me as, you'll pardon the reference, my own circumcision, not everyone in Warsaw agrees. Somehow word reaches Lesniczówka, and my Tata shows up at my door.
Whatever happened to that bright little boy who could recite the Psalms by the time he was 7, whose education your mama and sisters all sacrificed for? The child we pinned our hopes on.
Tata,
from the
please.
time God gave you breath.
Tata, please.
And this is the thanks we get.
You know I've always been grateful.
You have desecrated the memory of every Jew who has ever died rather than succumb to the pressure of the Goyim, what they have failed to destroy with clubs and guns and knives. You have destroyed with your narishkeit. I tried to raise a Jew but got a fool instead. A fool who is no longer welcome in the synagogue. Who will never say Kaddish for me when I'm gone. A fool who has disgraced his Tata.
No.
All I ever wanted was a son.
I am your son.
You are a goy. Better you should never have been born.
I'll prove it to you, to Mama, to everyone. Rachmiel Frydland may be many things, but a goy is not one of them.
So that's what you're doing here. You're still trying to prove something to your Tata.
My Tata's dead.
My friend, Tata is never dead. But starving in a ghetto, when you have a chance to live, that doesn't prove anything.
It does to me.
There was a piano, a baby grand piano, in the living room of my parents' fifth-story apartment. Just over there, beyond the walls, across from the park.
Oh, you were rich.
In the late afternoon, the sunlight would pour through the windows onto the beautiful, polished lid of the piano, which my mother cleaned and polished every day, without fail. It was my job to become... Well, I was 4 when I had my first lesson.
4?
It was my job to become a great pianist, just like Papa. Well, not like Papa, like Podolski. You could say it was the reason I existed.
I too had a job when I was 4.
Milking the cow?
No, that was the job of my sisters.
Ah.
You don't petition the Rabbi of Ravens for a son to milk the cow. No. The reason for my existence was fixed before I drew my first breath.
a son to say Kaddish for me when I am gone.
And like you, my first lesson begins when I turn 4.
Rachmiel, komm her, mach schnell. You'll make us late.
Coming, Tata.
Ah, there you are. Do you know what today is?
Shabbos, Tata.
Time for you to come with me when I go pray in the synagogue.
I'm coming with you?
Yes, and it's a very important job you have. I need you to carry this. Are your hands clean? All right.
Your tallis. The prayer shawl with the dancing fringes.
Those fringes aren't just for dancing. You see those hard little knots? There's one for each of the 613 commandments God gave to our people.
613 is such a big, big number.
Perhaps for a boy of 4, but when you become a man, well, enough of that for today. For now, you can stand beneath your tatas tallis until you're ready to stand before God on your own.
I hold the tallis tightly as we walk through our village to the home of Rebelli, where the men gather on Shabbos to pray.
Rachmiel, you must promise to be on your best behavior. Rebelli is the richest man in our district. You don't want your tata should be ashamed.
No, Tata.
Now, I'll tell you a secret. Rebelli's wife puts out cookies every Saturday morning.
Cookies?
You may take one, but only one.
We arrive at Rebelli's, and I have my cookie. Tata, when will it be time to pray?
We must wait for 3 more men. How many will that make?
10.
That is how many Jewish men are required for prayer.
But why?
Our father Abraham begged God to spare the evil towns of Sodom and Gomorrah. God, surely you will not destroy. If there are 50 righteous souls to be found, surely you'll not destroy the innocent along with the guilty. And God agreed. Then Abraham lowered the number to 40, then 30. Finally, he made a deal with God for 10 righteous men. So, every Shabbos, we wait for
10 men to pray.
Such a smart boy. Take another cookie.
Tata, I have a question.
Yes?
The men who come to Rebelli's on Shabbos, are they all righteous souls?
That, my son, is something only God knows.
That day, Tata didn't tell me what happened to Sodom and Gomorrah, but I soon learned that there were not enough righteous souls to prevent the terrible things that were to come. Stasiek, do you ever wonder about that?
About?
Were there not even 10 righteous Jews in all of Poland to prevent what has happened?
I don't think about it, Rachmiel.
You don't?
I suppose it's all those years in Yeshiva, teaching your mind to sniff around such questions like a dog with a bone. But what good can come of it?
Then I envy you.
You think I'm lazy.
I didn't say that.
But
you seem to have found a way to...
Trust. Yes, I have.
Childlike faith. Like those days I stood beneath my tata's tallis hoping for a cookie.
Trust isn't just for children, Rachmiel. Though, I confess, it seems to become harder to come by as time passes.
Each year, those 613 commandments become more terrifying as I approach the moment I will stand before God on my own. From Lesnichovka to Rudohuta to Chelm, the journey is lonely and my fears become nightmares. Will I be invited to the Messiah's feast? Will God count me among the righteous souls? Will I ever make my Tata proud? Then one Shabbos, it's finally here, my bar mitzvah. The familiar sounds of the weekly service seem distant as I step forward to read from the Torah. My Tata puts his hands on my shoulders, and though he barely touches me, I feel the weight of accountability shift from his soul to mine.
Today, you are a man.
It's December when I arrive home from Warsaw to tell my parents about our dear Esther. My Tata looks much older when he opens the door.
Rachmiel? He says, Rachmiel. Come. Such a tragedy. We only heard today.
You heard?
Oh, the Jewish men in Helm were marched to the riverbank and forced into the half-frozen river. The Russians on the other side, they think it's an attack, and they begin to shoot. The Germans shoot back, and the Jews are target practice. Rachmiel, what is it? Who is it?
It's Esther.
Baruch Dayan Emes. Blessed is the true judge.
We cover the mirrors. We sit on low stools. We weep and we remember. I've walked through the kitchen where Esther always helped Mama with the evening meal. I kneel outside near the garden she planted. Closed my eyes and listened for her laughter, but all I hear is hammering, even though Warsaw's 150 miles away. I welcome the unspoken truce between me and my tata. And for my part, I try to do what I can to be a less disappointing son. You know, Stasiek, I even risked my life for my mama's Shabbos chicken.
You risk your life?
My friend, you have never tasted my mama's chicken. One day I'm returning from a neighboring town with a chicken for Shabbos dinner. By now, traveling outside our neighborhood is crime, but Stasiek, who can find a kosher chicken in Lesnichovka? And what is Shabbos without a chicken?
And a little schnapps.
You know, I think maybe you drink too much.
Yeah, don't worry. I can hold my imaginary liquor.
So I walk on the back roads, carrying my chicken, avoiding every soldier I see, which is difficult considering how nearsighted I've become. Halfway home, there's an unpleasant encounter with a young man patrolling the area, but honestly, I don't blame him. He's just a soldier wishing he was home, enjoying his mama's chicken in Leipzig or Berlin.
Yeah, who can blame a soldier?
But a neighbor who has known me since the day I was born. A neighbor, a Christian neighbor, who preaches the love of Jesus and the grace of God. I'm almost home when I run into Mr. Hubscher, the neighbor who borrowed the chairs. He's standing outside his home. He's wearing the uniform of the Nazi SS. He's drunk, and he has a gun.
Stop. Hold it right there.
Good evening, Mr. Hubscher. It's Rachmiel.
I know who you are. You're my filthy Jew neighbor. You can call yourself whatever you want, but a Jew is a Jew, and you Jews are always scheming for ways to cheat real Christians like me. But the Fuhrer is going to get rid of all of you. And if you hold still, I'm going to do my part.
Fortunately for me, the gun is not loaded. But from that moment on, my parents seemed to find some peace with my beliefs. They reasoned that if I'm willing to risk my life for the Shabbos chicken, then maybe, Mama says, in spite of my beliefs, I have truly become a man. I show my tata my identification papers, and just like him, they're marked with the letter J for Judah. So maybe, he says, in spite of my beliefs, I'm not a goy.
Congratulations.
Funny, it's taken my family longer to remember I'm a Jew than our neighbor, Mr. Hubscher.
Or our other neighbor, Mr. Hitler. Oh, whatever happened to your sister, the one of Warsaw, Rivka?
Oh, thank God Rivka recovers, finds her way out before the ghetto was sealed. She arrives home, and for a time, life almost feels...
normal?
Rivka and I work together at the local farm, so our family doesn't starve. It's the kind of normal any Jewish family in Poland would welcome. In fact, things are so normal.
Yes?
Stasiek, something happens. Something good in the midst of everything.
But?
You remember Reb Gershon, the most highly respected Malamed in all of Rudahuta? The one with the beautiful daughter?
Oh, who was a foot taller than you?
When I was 7.
Yes.
Well, now, years later, Yocheved, that's her name, is all grown up, so am I, and I'm told that she is interested
Yes.
in Jesus.
Oh. Good.
But she's afraid to leave Ruda. And her mother, the Rebbetzin, is not too happy about feeding me still.
Though I doubt she'd take her tea kettle to Warsaw.
I pressed Yocheved to visit me in Lesnichovka. Mama is happy to have someone at Esther's empty seat. And after dinner, Yocheved and I read together from a little New Testament.
And
I start to feel responsible for this fragile young woman.
oh, we're feeling responsible.
And I decide that this feeling might be a little like love.
Mazel tov.
So, after midnight, in front of a few brave souls, Yocheved and I recite our vows. Three days later, my bride is sent to a nearby work camp. And trains filled with Jews begin to run on the tracks alongside our neighborhood, carrying people from Czechoslovakia who think they're being relocated to a Jewish colony in Poland.
It's the same here. Germans enter the ghetto for the first roundup, promising a lucky few a place in the country away from lice and disease. People line up with only minutes to gather their belongings. Soon we learn where they've been taken and what awaits them at their destination.
So when Yocheved escapes our camp, we don't wait around for a knock on the door. Rivka and a handful of others agree to join us in our little camp in hiding in the woods. I kiss my mom and Tata goodbye, and when the knock finally comes, my Tata's too weak to travel. Mama dies shortly after in a nearby camp in Sobibor. Forgive me, Stasiek, I never asked what happened to your family.
Most were taken into first deportation. My parents succumbed to typhus, and my grandfather refused his rations, insisted they be given to the children.
My grandfather was a righteous man.
Inside these walls, I've seen everything. Some who risk their lives and others who steal from the blind.
Then tell me, it doesn't shake your faith to breaking.
It's not that I've never questioned, it's that I've never found an answer.
Yet you trust.
Yes.
Then why is it so hard for me?
There you go again with that bone. Consulting the sages, and listening to those ancient voices arguing back and forth.
I'm trying to understand.
Tomorrow, you'll make your way out of here. And when the ghetto falls in a day or a week, you will describe what you've seen and heard. Not what you understand.
No, I'm meant to be here.
Oh, Rachmiel Frydland is meant to be many things, but trapped inside these walls is not one of them. You have papers and a chance to walk through those gates. You can testify for those who can no longer speak for themselves. Hey, you can even tell the world how Chelm was home to
many of Poland's great yeshivas, though I fear the stories will outlive the facts.
Then tell the story of OGRODOWA Street, where, in spite of yourself, you might have heard something like the voice of God.
Though it didn't sound anything like Caruso.
Now, before the sun comes up, tell me all about this wife of yours.
When I think of Yocheved, I picture that little girl peeking out from behind Reb Gershon. And all I want is to give her the life she dreams of. In the woods, I make her a promise. When the war is over, we will visit your mama's sister.
In Warsaw?
It's the biggest, most beautiful city in all of Poland. You could walk all day from sunrise to sunset and not see it all.
Rachmiel, you have experienced so much of the world, and I only know Ruda.
Then we will go wherever you wish. Here, come closer. I'm used to sleeping on the ground. you remember what my teacher said that morning in Chelm when I was late for class?
Sleep on the hard earth, live the life of affliction, yet toil in the study of the Torah, and it shall be well for you in the world to come.
My wife, not only are you beautiful, but you're clever as well.
Rachmiel, will it really be well for us in the world to come?
Here, come, sit. We'll eat the great wild ox of Jewish legend and drink the wine the Almighty Himself set aside on the sixth day of creation.
Oh, good. That's good. Oh, tomorrow, maybe just a piece of bread.
The next day, my sister Rivka is betrayed by a local farmer and persuaded to reveal the location of our little spot in the woods. Yocheved and I are separated, but as soon as it's light, I sneak my way into the town and find out what's become of Yocheved and the rest of them. There I overhear a couple of drunk peasants.
Oh, yeah. There was two of them. Oh, one was older, but the younger one, you know what I mean? So, but these SS, geez, they're old business. I don't know how you just stand there and something like that is turned over on a platter and say, 9, danke. So I turn over the Jew bitches to the commandant and collect my reward. Not as much as you might think. Reach out, one last little squeeze before I leave. And the damn Nazi bastard grabs my arm and twists it hard. Looks at me with those steely eyes they all got. Puts his gun right in my face. Like, what the hell, right? Finally, he lets me go. But then, the soldier makes the women kneel. And I hear one of them say, please. I think, well, there you go. Finally, ready to trade a little something for your life. But then I hear her say, can we have a moment to pray? Pray? Yeah, you damn sure bet I wouldn't waste my last moment. Yeah, anyway. But then, the weirdest thing, I swear to God, I heard her say, Jesus. Well, yeah, she was a Jew. Oh, shut up. I know a Jew when I see one. Anyway, I grab my money and head outside. And I think to myself, what a waste of a beautiful woman.
That beautiful woman was my wife. Yet, I am relieved that she spent her last cold, wet, filthy night in these miserable woods, where I now return because I don't know where else to go. You have taken everything. My sisters, my mama, my tata, and now my Yocheved. All that's left is my useless, disappointing life. Well, here it is, take it. Mamzers, murderers, come and get me. Please come find me, just come. Please find me, please. In the morning, I walk out of the woods. No one stops me. Sometimes a farmer offers me a potato or a piece of bread. To be honest, I don't remember. All I know is I'm going to Warsaw like I promised Yocheved. Weeks later, when the wildflowers are once again lining the street, I finally come to the edge of the city. The hammering has stopped. There are men with machine guns guarding the gates. All I can think about is getting inside. That same day, a Russian pastor I used to know spots me in the street.
Rachmiel Frydland? Such a coincidence, I ran into you. Perhaps God has arranged it, who knows? Yeah. It just so happens I have with me a set of forged documents. They're for a man inside the ghetto, the last survivor from that old fellowship of yours on OGRODOWA Street. Sadly, I learned today I'm too late. He died last night. Maybe you recognize his face?
Stasiek Eisenberg. Yes, I do. Stasiek Eisenberg was a man of great faith, a credit to his family, accomplished musician, the man who loved his schnapps. This is the only photo left from that time, though. I wish there were more. I wish there were pictures of what beautiful women my sisters would have grown up to become. Pictures of my grandchildren, of the grandchildren my parents certainly would have loved and spoiled. I begin to write down the names of the ones who were lost, who died of starvation, who were marched to their deaths, children thrown from windows, gassed, buried alive, drowned, shot, tortured, murdered in every way a twisted mind can conceive. I fill page after page with those I remember and rack my poor brain to recall the ones I have, God forgive me, forgotten. In the middle of the night, their faces flood my sleep. Students, teachers, rabbis, pastors, sisters, parents, wives. In my struggle, I turn to the book of Job. And there came a messenger unto Job and said, the oxen were plowing, the asses were feeding. The Sabaeans fell upon them and took them away. And I alone have escaped to tell you. There came another and said, the fire of God has fallen from heaven and burned up the sheep and consumed them. And I alone have escaped to tell you. And another said, the Chaldeans brought 3 bands and fell upon the camels and have carried them away. And I alone have escaped to tell you. Your sons and daughters were in their eldest brother's house. And behold, there came a great wind from the wilderness. The house fell upon them, and they are dead. And I alone have escaped to tell you. So this, as best as I understand it, is the story that I alone have escaped to tell. I can't explain it, but I have it on very good authority that that is not my job. And each year, for as long as God gives me life, I can do what I was born to do and fulfill my Tata's greatest desire.
A son to say Kaddish for me when I am gone.
Glorified and sanctified be God's great name throughout the world, which He created according to His will. May He establish His kingdom in your lifetime and during the life of the entire house of Israel, speedily and soon. And let us say, Amen. And let the one who creates peace in his celestial heights create peace for us, for all Israel, and for the whole world. And let us say, Amen.
Sag nicht keinmal, als du gehst dem letzten Weg. Gott schimmeln bleine, verstellen neue Tag. Kommen wird noch unser ausgebänkte schon. Es wird abbeugt von unser Trott, wir seien da. Kommen wird noch unser ausgebänkte schon. Es wird abbeugt von unser Trott, wir seien da. Vom grünen Palmenland bis weißen Land von Schnee. Wir kommen heut mit unser Pein, mit unser Weh. Und jeder spritzt, was ist gefallen, unser Blut. Sprotzen wird dort unser Gwure, unser Mut. Von jedem spritzt, was ist gefallen, von unser Blut. Sprotzen wird dort unser Gwure, unser Mut. Das Lied geschrieben ist mit Blut und nicht mit Blei. Es ist nicht kein Liedl von a Vogel oder frei. Das hat a Volk zwischen fallendig gewinnt. Das Lied gesungen mit Naganes in die Hände. Das hat a Volk zwischen fallendig gewinnt. Das Lied gesungen mit Naganes in die Hände. Da sag nicht keinmal, als du gehst dem letzten Weg. Hat schimmeln bleiene, verstellen neue Tag. Kommen wird noch unser ausgebänkte Show. Es wird abbeugt an unser Trott, wir seien da. Kommen wird noch unser ausgebänkte Show. Es wird abbeugt an unser Trott, wir seien da.